What is happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Eddie Lager Power Hour. Excuse me. Can't make it through an intro without burping, ever. But we got a lot of good stuff to talk about today. Friend of the show, Danny Haifong, was recently on the floor of the United Nations, so we're going to watch that. We're going to talk about the wildfires that have been ravaging Hawaii lately and Joe Biden's pathetic response as he continues to send millions and millions of dollars to Ukraine. We'll talk about some other things too. We'll see if we get to them. But got a lot of topics on the chopping block today, so I'm excited to dive into it with y'all. There's also a outlet based in, can't remember where they said they're based out of, Chicago maybe, who published an article of their favorite online leftist, socialist, Marxist creators, and Midwestern Marx was on that list. So very honored, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. Right after the international.
Imagine thinking that Russia deserves
political and economic power.
Yo, how's it going, everybody? Got a bunch of people in the chat. Excited to meet with y'all today. Sweet, average, authentic Americans are waking up to see what is going on and recognizing the work Midwestern Marx is putting in. Thank you, Raymond. I appreciate that very much. Yup. We're just going to keep growing, keep building, keep spreading the good word of Carlton Marx. We're going to keep advancing the class struggle, keep getting the working class educated. So how's it going, everybody? Glad to be back with another stream. I wish one of my co-hosts were here. Wish Carlos and Noah were here, but that's all right. You can just listen to me ramble all day. Jacob, that TikTok you sent me to react to is friggin' 8 minutes long. I should react to it, though, because Russia did save the world from the Nazi menace. But maybe we'll react to that at some point. But I have a lot of videos pulled up here to react to today already. This is the first thing I want to talk about. This is a really cool publication called In These Times. I'll throw this in the chat real quick. Left my job, I'll join you from my desk, Eddie. Let's go. Welcome, Jimmy. Yeah, screw your job. Screw your exploitation. It's time to learn about Marxism in this bitch. So this was recently shared. Where is In These Times based out of? I cannot remember. Let us check. It was Chicago. Okay, they're a publication in Chicago that's been around for a while. Here you can see all of the people who work with them, and very excited I was when they reached out and said that Midwestern Marx is one of their favorite creators. And you can see all the good creators that we were lumped in here with. You got the Deprogram podcast and some others. Here's a picture of us talking to Vijay Prashad. Here's our thumbnail talking about Paul Robeson. But they mentioned us with some even really big people like ContraPoints. But there I am. There's your boy. Looks like they colored my teeth yellow, but I'm still looking good. I don't know if I even have that shirt anymore. That was one of my favorite shirts back in the day. But image of Eddie Lagersmith from Midwestern Marx. Eddie Lagersmith is a college wrestling coach and a Marxist who teaches about socialism on the side. Don't miss his Marxism for Noob series on TikTok, Midwestern Marx, which also has a print journal. He debunks anti-communist scare tactics and debates other YouTubers about U.S. wars. Oh, and his detailed workout video includes union-built rail pull-ups and proletarian push-ups. That's facts. Me and my buddy went down to the union-built railways and we did push-ups on it for a workout video. So maybe that's why I'm so freaking sore today. But shout out to these guys for sharing our work. Really appreciate that. We've received a bump in followers since this happened. So great honor to be mentioned on here. And yeah, check out In These Times because they publish about politics, labor issues. Here they're talking about Sean Fain, the new UAW president who recently threw the company contract in the trash because it was trash. So yeah, shout out to In These Times. Very cool. Did they call you guys BreadTube? They did. I'm not going to complain, all right? Well-deserved recognition. Thank you. Yeah, I consider like BreadTube, and like ContraPoints in them kind of different from Midwestern Marks. And obviously I have some major critiques of them, but whatever. I'm just happy to be mentioned in that article. Happy that more people are going to be steered towards our content. So, yeah. So there's that. Now let's do this Hawaii thing because, dude, this pisses me off. This pisses me off so very bad. So obviously everybody knows that there have been really, really deadly wildfires sweeping through Hawaii. People have been losing their homes. People have been left without anything. And rather than redivert the billions of dollars that are going to Ukraine. Oh, I put 750 million. I meant to say billion. It's supposed to be billion to Ukraine. I'm going to change the title of our YouTube video right now. Am I allowed to do that? So Biden just recently, well, for one, Obama called for people to donate to the Red Cross, saying that the Red Cross will help Hawaii, even though the Red Cross just recently got caught stealing money that people had donated for disaster relief to use it on internal something or other. But it was like 50% of the money Red Cross was taking and filtering into their own operations rather than using it on what people were donating it for. So Biden's calling for the people to donate to the Red Cross. And I swear to God, Buddy tried to pat himself on the back on Twitter for giving $700 to people who lost their homes. To people who lost their homes in a wildfire. He is giving them $700, which is about enough to go grocery shopping twice if you have a big family. And these people are supposed to replace their homes, replace everything which they just lost with $700. While at the same time, he's asking Congress for another $40 billion to send to Ukraine. $700 for Hawaiians who just lost everything to a wildfire, and $40 billion to fight a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine. None of that money can be spent on homes. None of that money can be spent on disaster relief. None of that money can be spent on food. It's all got to go to weapons, and more fucking weapons. Tell me again how Biden's the lesser of two evils, folks. Tell me how this guy's the lesser of two evils, because from my vantage point, he's one of the most evil bastards I've ever seen in my life. If I was the president of America and it was my job to take care of American civilians, I can't even imagine sending $40 billion to Ukraine for weapons rather than taking care of the Americans who just had their homes burned down. But Biden doesn't think about his constituents. He doesn't think about what's best for them. He thinks about what's best for his donors. He thinks about what's best for the military-industrial complex and the American political establishment and NATO, which right now is an endless proxy war against Russia. American citizens be damned. So that was August 11th. August 11th that Biden asked for another 40 billion. It's like these people are shameless. These people are shameless. At the same time that they're asking for 40 billion more to Ukraine, they're giving themselves a pat on the back. We're such good guys for giving $700 to Hawaii. God, I wish the people of Hawaii would go burn down Joe Biden's house right now. Go burn everything he owns to the ground and then say, "Oh, we'll give you $700. We pooled our resources together. We got $700 for you, you dementia-ridden jackass. Good luck. Good luck making it now that your home and all of your belongings have burned to the ground, President Biden. I'm sure you'll be able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you piece of human scum." So, also we had reported today, and this is something someone sent me in the Discord chat. Apparently, as Biden's patting himself on the back like the arrogant, narcissistic, corrupt jackass he is for sending these guys $700, there's a 12-mile media-free zone around Maui where the wildfire struck. So Biden's on Twitter patting himself on the back for sending these guys $700, and then they're blocking off any media so that the American people can't actually see what's going on. And Obama's doing videos asking people to donate to the corrupt Red Cross. I'm sorry, it might sound like I'm getting a little emotional with this story, a little more emotional than usual, but these are the kind of stories that really, really get to me. Because there are people in Maui right now who just lost everything due to no fault of their own. Their homes just burned to the ground. And the politicians in this country who are supposed to take care of those people are giving them $700 and then asking the American working class to donate to the Red Cross, to take care of it for us so we can keep sending your tax money to Ukraine. No, motherfucker, you already take 40% of our paychecks every week in taxes. Use some of that money you steal from us every week on people in Hawaii. That's what it's for. I didn't give you that money so you could send it to Ukraine and try and destroy the Russian state. Look at this. So this is obviously a tweet. You know, I don't know if it's been confirmed that there's the media free zone, but this is the same thing that happened when the trains derailed in Palestine, Ohio. They weren't letting any media in or out. Rather than sending resources and sending people to clean up the area and help people, our government is sending people to the area to block any media from getting in so people can't see what's going on. And same thing with the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. Simultaneously, Biden was in Ukraine begging for more money from Congress, which is really money from the American taxpayers, to send to Ukraine. Take care of your own people, you piece of scum. Take care of your own people. Send U.S. government personnel to help people in Maui, to help people in East Palestine. Don't send them to block off the media so nobody can tell what's going on. Like, how obvious could it be that the Democrats and Joe Biden are corrupt pieces of scum? Is this why the Democrats are so much better than the Republicans, Kyle Kalinske? Vape Lord? Is this what you were talking about on your show the other day when you were saying it's not even close? The Republicans are so much worse and it's not even close? How do you get any worse than this? How do you get any worse than giving people who just lost everything some scraps of their own tax money, while you send billions and billions and billions and billions to a never-ending war that's killing thousands and thousands of people abroad that you created? I'm not seeing how the Democrats are better. I'm voting for Cornel West. I think Kyle Kalinski's hair dye is seeped into his brain if he thinks that these Democrats are the lesser of two evils. These are the most evil motherfuckers I've ever seen in my life. I can't think of anything more evil than letting people in Maui, Hawaii die while you use all of their tax money to perpetuate an endless war in Europe. I can't think of anything more evil than that. And there's a special place in hell for Joseph Biden. And at least he showed up. At least he showed up and walked around and said, don't worry, guys. Don't worry. I know you just lost all of your homes, but we're going to give you $700 so you can have a luau and forget about it. And I'm going to stand next to these people with lays on. And that should make it better. Look how stupid he looks. Look how stupid this man looks standing there with a present. I got you guys a gift. I know you just lost your homes, but things are really heating up in Ukraine. We had to send them $750 billion. So, but don't worry, I got you a present. Dementia-ridden demon is what this man is. The devastation is overwhelming. Yeah, $700 should fix it though, right, Joe? The devastation is overwhelming. They could probably use $750 billion invested in rebuilding their infrastructure, rebuilding their homes, getting people food and clean water, doing disaster relief. I'm sure they could have used the $750 billion you just sent to Ukraine, but nah, $700 and whatever you and your dumb wife are holding here should do it. Ugh. Gross. He should be persecuted for this. Good. Yeah, why not? The city was destroyed by a fire, and yet the U.S. funds Ukraine. Right, and like really, it's not like if you're a liberal, if you buy into all the nonsense about Ukraine, right? All the nonsense in the media about Ukraine. It's like, well, we have to help the people in Ukraine. That takes priority. And it's like, no, NATO's the reason Ukraine's in the situation they're in now. If the Democrats in 2014 didn't help overthrow Ukraine's government and put a highly fascistic government in power instead, then Ukraine wouldn't even be in this situation. The U.S. created that war, and in doing so, they've killed thousands and thousands of Ukrainians and thousands of Russians. And then they want to pretend, oh, we got to focus on Ukraine, right? We got to help them. You're not helping anyone. You're pushing Ukrainians to their death at gunpoint, saying, go fight Russia for us, Ukraine. And then you're allowing people to starve and die and have their homes burned to the ground here in the U.S. as our infrastructure and our railways are crumbling. And you're telling the American people, no, we can't do anything about it right now. We need to continue this proxy war that we started in Ukraine. And then they want to act like the good guys. And then they have the gall to act like the good guys. And then media figures like Kyle Kalinske have the gall to tell working class Americans you have to vote Republican or you're a privileged person. You're a bad person. If you're someone in Hawaii whose home just burned to the ground and you're pissed that Biden only gave you $700 and then asked for another $40 billion to Ukraine, well, you're privileged if you vote Republican. Like, what are you talking about, Kalinske? What are you talking about, you sock dem Democratic liberal simps, liberal sycophants? The Democratic Party is one of the most disgusting and egregious, undemocratic, corrupt, warmongering parties that's ever existed in any country in human history. only rivaled by the Republicans, which is why they're able to say, vote for us. Vote for us. At least we're not them. So that story just pissed me right off this morning. Pissed me right off. The gall. The gallbladder. Kyle Kalinske, the Backstreet Vape Lord. Yeah, man. Kyle got his ears pierced. He got his hair dyed. He started vaping on camera, and all of a sudden he was supporting the Democrats. I don't mean to make fun of, like, do what you want, dye your hair if you want. My ears are pierced, so I can't really talk shit about the earrings, but once you start scolding people and telling people that they're privileged for not voting for this Democratic Party run by Joe Biden, my respect for you goes right out the window. Many professional managerial class type people have defense stocks in their 401ks. They love NATO expansion. It's great for the value of their 401ks. Maybe that's it. Maybe everybody's just invested in Raytheon. Maybe all the social democrats are invested in Raytheon. So they're like, yes, we should do Medicare for all, but we should keep perpetuating endless wars everywhere around the world. So that was that. I think it makes most sense next to go to Dan.
I now give the floor to Mr. Den
on the floor of the United Nations, because he recently addressed the UN Security Council on NATO's aid to Ukraine. So Danny's a friend of the show. He has a really, really, really good YouTube channel called The Left Lens. It's one of the YouTube channels that I watch regularly in order to stay up to date with geopolitics and what's going on with China, what's going on in Ukraine. It's really fantastic. Another show that I watch is called The Duran. But Danny oftentimes has the Duran guys on his show. So this was a huge moment here to see that he addressed the UN Security Council. And, you know, props to him for making that happen. You know, this is what we need to do as communists and socialists. You know, this is big boy stuff right here, showing up to the UN and explaining what's going on with aid to Ukraine. So let's roll. This is where all your money's going instead of Maui.
Danny Haiphong.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the council, Mr. President. Today I'm here as a journalist who has dedicated the last 10 years of my life writing about and speaking out against the long record of human rights abuses and war crimes committed by my country of birth, the United States. I don't consider this a hobby or even a profession, but rather a duty to all of humanity and those who want to see a better and more peaceful future. I'm here too as a U.S. citizen who...
That's true. That's why it's so annoying when you talk about Ukraine and you criticize the NATO proxy war in Ukraine and people go, you're just a puppet of Putin or you're just a grifter. Like, dude, if I was a grifter, I would not be doing this. If I was a grifter trying to make money off of politics, I would not be talking about this. I'm talking about this because I'm actually following this issue and I know the truth of it. That the U.S. empire pushed Ukraine into this situation, overthrew Ukraine's sovereign government, and has been trying to use them as a proxy to fight Russia down to the last Ukrainian. And then they blame the whole thing on Russia, of course. But it's a duty to the truth and to try and inform the American people about the truth. It's not a grift. This would be the stupidest grift in the world. I got 7 of my TikTok accounts banned that had hundreds of thousands of followers. If this is a grift telling the truth about Ukraine, it's about the dumbest grift I ever thought of.
Who has witnessed tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars go to funding and arming a proxy war against Russia, while people in the U.S., ordinary people, suffer from rising levels of poverty, homelessness, suicide, and economic insecurity. As Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1958, true peace is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice. On June 2nd, 2023, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken gave a speech in Helsinki where he stated that military support for Ukraine must be prioritized over diplomacy. The argument goes that a steady supply of arms to Ukraine will turn the tide on the battlefield and force Russia to the negotiating table. Blinken is supposed to be the U.S.'s top diplomat, not a champion of escalating conflict. However, the sentiment that he communicated has been a foundational feature of the justifications given for the West's continued flow of arms to Ukraine. The facts, however, undermine Blinken's assertions. First, U.S. and Western arms are anathema to resolving conflict. The U.S. is the biggest arms exporter in the world, comprising around 40% of all global arms sales. These arms have been instrumental in the bloodiest wars of our last 2 generations, including the U.S.-led invasions of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. U.S. arms play a major role in escalating tensions in the Korean Peninsula and the military encirclement of Russia and China, which has ushered in a new Cold War and all of the risks that come with it. Second, it was never Russia that needed to be forced to the negotiating table. Back in December 2021, if we remember, Russia provided draft proposals of security guarantees to the U.S. and to NATO that were meant to serve as the basis of dialogue and negotiation. They were summarily rejected. By late January 2022, the U.S. announced 200,000 pounds of what was deemed quote-unquote lethal aid to Ukraine in an obvious signal of escalation. In April 2022, both U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin traveled to
I wonder how he did this. I wonder how he was invited to do this, because he's calling them out on everything that they don't want to be called out on. They're being called out on the U.S. rejecting a peace plan, the U.S. breaking up peace agreements, the U.S. escalating. He even brought up the NATO intervention in Libya that NATO doesn't like to talk about. This is awesome.
Ukraine just weeks after a peace deal fell through and admitted that the U.S. was all in on winning the current fight in Ukraine. What they meant by this was that the U.S. was fully committed to corralling its own military arsenal and that of its NATO partners in a proxy war against Russia to the last Ukrainian. The absence of diplomacy in times of conflict cannot but lead to escalation. That Russia's security, and for that matter, the security of the entire world, has been dismissed so summarily by the West is proof enough that the ceaseless supply of arms to Ukraine endangers peace. Weapons to Ukraine do not represent some kind of quote-unquote arsenal of democracy, as some in the U.S. foreign policy establishment tout. NATO countries have already provided $40 billion in weapons to Ukraine over the span of this conflict, and we have witnessed these weapons become heavier, deadlier, and more provocative, stymieing the possibility of a negotiated settlement to this conflict. Many of these weapons have landed on the black market to drug cartels, criminal organizations, and indeed, neo-Nazi and fascist elements, many of which now make up parts of Ukraine's armed forces. Furthermore, NATO has essentially armed...
Dang, he even said Ukraine's got a bunch of Nazis in their armed forces. All the liberal media just gasped, how could you say that? Don't you know that after the Azov battalion became part of Ukraine's actual military forces, they stopped being right-wing? That's got to be the dumbest argument that I've heard since this conflict started. The people who say that, no, once the Azov battalion actually became part of Ukraine's National Guard, they stopped being right-wing. They kicked all the right-wingers out. Sure, they were ethno-nationalist neo-Nazis before that, who worshiped Stepan Bandera. But, after they joined Ukraine's military, after a far-right government took power in Ukraine and started bringing all these ethno-nationalist groups into the military, they all just stopped being right-wing. Does anyone believe this shit?
Armed Ukrainian army after Ukrainian army at the expense of its own arsenal. The New York Times sounded the alarm 8 months ago that Ukraine is now the location of an artillery and tank war, the likes of which the West was not prepared to fight long term. And if this is the case, then rational minds may assume that the West would cease its supply of deadly weaponry. But the opposite has occurred. The U.S. approved of sending cluster munitions.
West has an issue with not extending their same skepticism to state-aligned media, to corporate media. Yes, they do that. They do that, like, anything like CGTN, Chinese media that's connected to the Chinese government in any way, or like Russia RT, is that Russia Today or the Russian Times, whatever. Like, that's state media, that's government media. Telesur in Venezuela, which actually does amazing work. So does CGTN and RT, but that's state-aligned media. That's government-controlled media. Like the BBC and PBS. We have public media too. We have state-owned media too. And a lot of times, like PBS is, they're flawed, but they're a lot better than CNN and MSNBC and the corporate media that's beholden to their advertisers and beholden to their viewer counts. Right? There's no rule that says corporate-owned media can't do propaganda. There's no rule that says propaganda can only come from government media. But yeah, there's this idea in America that media can only be propaganda if it's owned by the government. Like, dude, corporations can lie to you too. And the corporate media apparatus, as Noam Chomsky said, any dictator, any government would be jealous of how thoroughly the corporate media, the private-owned media in America, has brainwashed our people.
To Ukraine last month, the same munitions that continue to kill and explode on civilians.
Just like when the brown shirts stopped being Nazis after they became part of the German military. Yeah, yes. All those fascistic militias in Germany, after they joined the German military and Hitler rose to power, they stopped being right-wing. That's what happens. That's totally possible. Just like the Azov Battalion. This is sarcasm for people who can't tell. These, after in both countries, extreme ethno-nationalist governments took power and then filtered the ethno-nationalist militias into the actual security forces of the country.
In Laos, decades after the U.S. invasion there, and which have long been condemned by over 100 countries worldwide. I'm a journalist and a geopolitical analyst, not a military expert. But such experts in recent months have come clean about the limitations of Western firepower. Camille Grand, former Assistant Secretary General of Defense Investment at NATO, stated that, quote, "a day in Ukraine is a month or more in Afghanistan," end quote. She is referencing the fact that Ukraine burns through nearly half of the artillery produced in the United States in a single day, per month in a single day. Former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, James Stavridis, acknowledged last May that analysts were correct to assume that Ukraine is burning through a year's worth of U.S. production monthly. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and U.S. President Joe Biden have both acknowledged these weapons shortages, with Biden admitting during his announcement of cluster munitions for Ukraine that, quote, "this is a war relating to munitions, and they're running out of ammunition, and we're low on it," end quote. And I'm not even touching on issues of personnel, training, and other logistical items here.
Someone says, or Cheese Guevara says, it certainly worked out for capitalists buying up Ukrainian oil and assets for sure. And that's one of the economic factors here that's being overlooked. I've constantly brought up that article by the Atlantic Council where Zelensky and the American military industrial complex heads said that they wanted to turn Ukraine into a big Israel, aka a country with total austerity, total neoliberal economic program, trickle-down economics, where the U.S. just gives them money, weapons and weapons and weapons and weapons, and the military-industrial complex is able to enrich themselves off of it, the same way that they do in Israel, selling them like $3 billion in weapons a year to enforce an apartheid on the Palestinians. And, you know, Ukraine's economy, to the extent that it wasn't already privatized, has now been completely privatized, completely induced with neoliberal shock therapy, we could call it. Austerity, privatization, neoliberal economics. And their economy has essentially been plundered by Western multinational corporations and giant banks. Right? So they're making a killing. Not just the military industrial complex is making money off of this, but other American capitalists and multinational interests who have taken control of the Ukrainian economy, who have had Ukrainian state-run industries basically handed to them, the same way that kind of happened when the Soviet Union fell in many ways, called as privatization. Which privatization was a term that was originally coined with the Nazis in Germany as they were selling off their state-run industry to these multinational capitalists and wealthy oligarchs. So more and more parallels between Ukraine and the Yazis in Germany. I can probably say Nazi on YouTube, right? On TikTok, you can't even say Nazi. They'll take you down, even if you're obviously against them.
All of these problems have come to a head as the last several months saw Ukraine's spring counteroffensive gain much discussion. For months, political and military officials in the West regularly broadcasted to media outlets of an oncoming, victorious offensive that would take large amounts of territory from Russia. Yet at the same time, Ukraine, and in particular its head of state, Volodymyr Zelensky, repeatedly demanded that the West increase its supply of heavy weaponry, including air power. Zelensky has blamed over and over the West for its lackluster supply of arms.
Zelensky celebrating the worst capitalists and banks like Goldman and Sachs coming to rebuild the economy. Yes, he did do that, meaning by rebuild, they mean plundering the economy. Like, oh, thank you, BlackRock is on their way. BlackRock will save us. No, they won't. BlackRock and the American capitalists are experts at profiting off of disaster. If you've got a conflict going on, they're not coming to help you. They're coming to find a way to make money off of it, probably at your expense. Now he's talking about Zelensky blaming the West, which is so true. Zelensky's constantly giving these speeches. We need more weapons. We need more weapons. We need more weapons. Bro, how many weapons do you need? There's not enough weapons in the world. The world's literally running out of weapons to give you. He's just terrified because he's backed himself into a corner. Zelensky made himself a puppet of the United States and NATO. Russia snapped back, clapped back against the U.S. and NATO and what they were doing in Ukraine. And now Zelensky's days are numbered unless he can turn this into World War III, right? Unless he can draw all the NATO countries into this conflict, which would be World War III and the end of Western civilization and would be likely result in nuclear war. That's Zelensky's only way to save himself at this point. His back's against the wall. So he's just he's just lashing out lately.
In conjunction with the months-long delay of this counteroffensive against Russia. Now, this counteroffensive is in its third month, and the results have been disastrous. Around 30% of NATO's weapon supplies to Ukraine have been destroyed. The death toll on the battlefield is staggering. An estimated 43,000 Ukrainian forces have been killed, and reports are surfacing that local morgues in Ukraine are seeing nearly double the bodies since the counteroffensive began. And for what? The optimism of Western officials and diplomats has waned, with many now acknowledging that Ukraine has not even penetrated Russia's first defensive line. So I think the better question then is cui bono? Who benefits and what benefits?
Also called them out on the failed Ukrainian counteroffensive. Again, he's calling out everything that the U.S. media hates, every myth that the U.S. media has pushed out. Ukraine is winning, Ukraine is winning, Ukraine is winning. The counteroffensive is going great. No, it's not. No, it's not. And you just got called out to your faces about your lies.
From Western arms being poured into Ukraine. Certainly not Ukraine if the results of the counteroffensive.
Literally, Leo. He's like, why'd I ever stop being a comedian? I wish I was a puppeteer instead of a puppet of NATO. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat, Leo. Appreciate you.
And the conflict as a whole are the measure. And it certainly isn't global peace instability either. For all the benefits that come from an emerging multipolar world, the incessant militarization of Ukraine pushed by the West is helping fuel a worldwide economic slowdown and the potential of major power conflict, which could very well take on a nuclear character. So a simple answer to this question is the arms industry, the corporations that have profited mightily from this conflict. Shareholders of the largest military contractors are being paid handsomely since the conflict began as profits soar. The top 25 Western military contractors have seen their revenues increase by 11% over the past year to $212 billion. Arms sales are expected to increase to $450 billion in total by the end of 2023, an increase of $47 billion thanks to the Ukraine conflict. This bonanza in arms sales is thus making the slim minority of the richest people richer, while the rest of the world is left to resolve the myriad of problems left in the wake of this conflict. One of the primary responsibilities of the United Nations Security Council, as stated.
Does Danny contact the UN or the other way around? I'm not sure. I was wondering the same thing. I was wondering how this got set up. Somebody said it was probably a country like Cuba or, a friendly country who's against the proxy war who invited him. Hopefully he'll explain that after this because I'm pretty sure he gives some commentary here at the end. So,
by the UN Charter is the maintenance of international peace and stability. Ongoing Western arms sales to Ukraine are not only a violation of the UN Charter, but they also reveal the geopolitical realities that undergird this conflict. Indeed, it would be simplistic to claim that profits alone from Western arms sales are what is driving a wedge in the cause of peace. The United States, where I reside, has a long record of waging unilateral military conflict on a global scale in contravention of the UN Charter, with 800 plus foreign military bases, 11 command structures, and a public military budget of nearly $1 trillion US. There is now an open conflict within the U.S. foreign policy establishment over whether Ukraine and arming Ukraine to maximum effect is a good idea, or whether other military matters deserve more attention, with a leaked memo from top Air Force brass claiming that the U.S. must prepare to go to war with China by 2025. So Ukraine
also calling them out on the broader Cold War strategy. I love it. I love it, Danny. You killed this, my man, if you're watching this. Much love. This was a great job. You called out the U.S.'s broader strategy. You called out all of the main myths that are being pushed by the Western media to try and absolve themselves of any guilt and convince Americans that we need to continue sending money and arms to Ukraine. Called it all out, and I plan to try and boost this video as much as I can because it's fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dog Eater, for being a YouTube member and for the $2 super chat. Communism is the hammer we use to crush our enemies. I love it. That gets me hyped up to go wrestle later today. I actually wrestled already this morning, and I'm super sore.
This finds itself in the eye of a much larger storm, that of a U.S. policy of great power competition, or what is better termed great power confrontation, led by the United States. Peace and stability is not possible so long as the West pursues a foreign policy of unilateral interventionism in Ukraine to fulfill a larger geopolitical goal of unipolarity. This policy runs completely counter to the principles of the UN Charter. The continued flow of arms to Ukraine is a violation of Article 2, Section 3 of this charter, requiring member states to resolve conflict in a peaceful manner, and these arms only prolong the conflict with devastating consequences. The U.S. and its Western partners, and whoever goes along with it, must learn to operate within the framework of international law, just like all other member states, or the world will face the continued threat of instability and war, no matter the efforts of this Security Council and other United Nations.
I think that's good because the U.S. doesn't, follow the rules of international law. But one good thing that Vijay Prashad points out in his book, Washington Bullets, is that international law in the UN has been designed with the interests of multinational corporations and the U.S. empire in mind. Right? International law is bourgeois international law. It's been constructed by the bourgeois class and, political apparatuses that serve the bourgeois class. So even that international law still needs to be restructured in many ways because it's incredibly biased towards the U.S., as are these institutions that are supposed to support international law, like the UN. But yes, the U.S. does. And this is what the neoconservative ideology is, which, neoconservatives and the whole ideology is basically taken over both parties in America. But their whole ideology is that the U.S.'s interests should be placed above international law, right? So if the U.S. has an interest in invading Iraq, it doesn't matter that it's against international law because the U.S.'s interests are prioritized. John Bolton straight up wrote this. He straight up wrote an article saying this is our ideology. If U.S. interests are at stake, then international law doesn't matter. And of course, by U.S. interests, he means the interests of the bourgeoisie, the interests of the ruling capitalist class, the big bankers and multinational corporations and shareholders on Wall Street. But that's their ideology. That's what they believe in. You see it here, the way they callously ignore international law, the way they just sent Ukraine cluster munitions because they're running out of weapons to send Ukraine after promising they'd never do that again, after dropping tons and tons of cluster bombs on the nation of Laos. Can you watch Vivek Ramaswamy on Taiwan? He is based. Oh, I did see him talk about Taiwan. Yeah, we'll watch that at some point for sure because that went kind of viral. Thank you again, Dog Eater, for the $2 super chats. The work we do here at the Institute would be impossible without our Patreon supporters and our super chatters. I recently learned that a lot of leftist publications are getting like financing and funding from, different sources. All of our funding comes from you guys. All of our financing comes from small dollar donations from the audience. So we really, really, really appreciate anybody who's given us anything ever. Appreciate it so much. And of course, if you can't do that, just be sure to like the stream, subscribe to the YouTube, follow the Twitch, and you can share it on your social medias if you really want to help us. But thank you very much, Dog Eater. And yes, we will watch that.
Bodies. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure.
Dang it, I was hoping he would give a little commentary on it. I'm sure he will at some point, but great job, Danny. Go support Danny's channel. Danny Haifong on YouTube. Whoa, he's at 87,000 subs. He's blasting through the glass ceiling. Good job, Danny. Doesn't look like he did any videos commenting on his UN appearance, but I hope he does at some point because I'd love to hear him reflect on it a little bit. But shout out to him. Vivek Ramaswamy's not based. Yeah, I think it's more that he had a base take on Taiwan. I don't think he's, ideologically in line with us in any way, but admits he would let China invade Taiwan post 2029 if elected. Well, how could China invade Taiwan when Taiwan is part of China, New York Post? What sense does that make, my friends? Let's see what this dude said.
I'm being very clear. Xi Jinping should not mess with Taiwan until we have achieved semiconductor independence, until the end of my first term, when I will lead us there. And after that, our commitments to Taiwan and our commitments to be willing to go to military conflict will change after that, because that's rationally in our self-interest. That is honest, that is true, and that is credible.
Let's replay that.
It's rationally in our will change after that to Taiwan, and our commitments to be willing to go to military conflict will change after that, because that's rationally in our self-interest. That is honest semiconductor independence until the end of my first term, when I will lead us there. And after that, our commitments to Taiwan and our commitments to be willing to go to military conflict will change after that, because that's...
I mean, that kind of makes sense, but you still don't need to go to war to defend Taiwan against China when Taiwan is part of China, and U.S. policy recognizes the one China policy and recognizes that Taiwan isn't a sovereign country. If you actually look at what's been written about it in U.S. law, but I mean, we don't need semiconductor independence. I'm all for, let's invest in semiconductors and produce semiconductors ourselves. Obviously, I'm a socialist. I believe in investing in production and investing in jobs and investing in building up the productive forces of our own country and bettering the lives of our own people. But, we don't need to go to war with China to defend the semiconductors in Taiwan, right? If reunification happens, there's, Taiwan or China's not just going to cut us off from their semiconductors, right? China's got a trade policy of what they call mutual development and complete non-interventionism. That's why they trade with the U.S. a bunch. They even trade with countries like Israel, right? They trade with everybody. So it's not like China, it's not like reunification happens and all of a sudden China just cuts us off from Taiwanese semiconductors. So that part doesn't make sense. But of course, right? Of course, this makes sense. He's just looking at this from the interests of the United States. Of course, it's not in our interest to go to war with China over Taiwan, to push the U.S. towards World War III, because Taiwan is reunifying with China. Taiwan's been part of China for hundreds and hundreds of years. So this is what's going on now. And you see this with people like Colonel Douglas McGregor or Scott Ritter, people who aren't communists, right? But who are looking out for the interests of the United States and the U.S. government. And they're looking at what Biden and Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken and all these neocons and neoliberals who are currently running the government and pushing us towards World War III with Russia and China. They're looking at what these guys are doing and they're saying this is lunacy. This is ludicrous. What are they doing? Right? Why would we push towards World War III with Russia and China? How is that in the interests of the American people? It's terrible statecraft. It is terrible statesmanship. So obviously we've been against imperialism from the jump because of our ideology, because we're communists, we're Marxist-Leninists. But even these non-Marxist-Leninists like Scott Ritter, Douglas McGregor, Vivek Ramaswamy Swam are looking at U.S. foreign policy and saying, what the hell? How is it in our interest to fight a war with China, to spend more of our resources on encircling China and trying to destroy China, when Americans are suffering here at home and when China has no beef with us, right? When China's not encircling our country with military, China's not sanctioning us, China's just trading with us and trading with the whole world. Why would we go and start World War III with them? So even these people who aren't ideologically aligned with the anti-imperialists are realizing how imperialism is leading to the decay of the United States as a society. And we have these lunatics, these psychopaths like Victoria Nuland, Anthony Blinken, and Joe Biden leading our country towards World War III as people's homes are burning up in Hawaii and they don't have any money for disaster relief, and as trains are derailing, as 40,000 people die every year because they don't have health care. Right? So any rational person who understands what's going on is starting to look at this and say, what the hell? What the hell are these neocons doing? They're going to destroy America.
Rationally in our self-interest. That is
What do you
honest,
think?
that is
Yeah,
true,
as
and
we
that is
speak.
credible.
By the way, China doesn't even have plans to reunify. This has been, pushed by the American media that China's looking to reunify with Taiwan any second now. The U.S. constantly trying to use Taiwan as a jumping off point to launch regime change efforts against China. That's kind of making it more of a priority in China. Like, we should push for reunification faster. But, nobody's saying that it's going to happen within the next 10 years, I don't think. I haven't heard that from any scholars. Maybe that's something we can ask Roland Bohr. We're interviewing the scholar Roland Bohr this week, who's done a lot of incredible work on China. If you don't think China's a socialist country, please read the work of Roland Bohr. I saw somebody put that in the chat earlier. Please, and watch. We're actually going to talk to him about theology, but then later we'll do an interview with him about China. But yeah, very, very interesting to see another person from the political establishment, or another Republican, or just another non-communist, a non-anti-imperialist, come out against what the U.S. is doing with China and what the U.S. is doing towards Russia. Because they recognize that it's irrational. Excited for the Bohr interview. Sweet. I'm glad. It's going to be a lot of fun. Did you see the Alan McLeod article on Mint Press News about how Call of Duty is almost completely run by the State Department, hacks with zero experience in working in the video game industry until they got hired by Activision? I did, and I actually had a TikTok go viral about it. And a lot of people were like, we knew this already. They basically could tell. But yeah, here's the article being mentioned. This went viral on TikTok, which makes sense because there's probably a bunch of kids who play Call of Duty on TikTok. But yeah, McLeod got his hands on documents that reveal how many State Department operatives are working on the Call of Duty games at Activision. I mean, Mint Press News is killing it with this kind of stuff. Right after we got banned on TikTok, they revealed that TikTok was being run by NATO operatives and national security agents, and then they got banned shortly after. They actually reposted my video talking about the censorship of Mint Press News. But yeah, they've been killing it with this, showing how deeply ingrained the U.S. State Department and the deep state is in everyday life. They're so deeply ingrained even in Hollywood and in entertainment media, at this point, it's like you can't enjoy anything without, seeing a bunch of State Department involvement there. But yeah, it's not just the corporate media, right? It's not just CNN and MSNBC. That's not enough to brainwash the country. They need to control the entertainment media too. They need to control the social media platforms where people are exchanging information. They need to control the video games and the movies. And if you don't know, there's a rule where if movies in Hollywood use any military equipment and they want it to look realistic, then the U.S. State Department and the Pentagon basically get control over whatever's in the movie. They basically get control over the script. So the most popular video games and most popular movies have the fingerprints of the deep state and the State Department and U.S. intelligence all over them. All over them. And so many of my friends in college, I watched them stare at the screen for hours playing Call of Duty with their mouth agape. Shoot, Russian, shoot, Iraqi, shoot for hours and hours. And it's like watching somebody get brainwashed or hypnotized. It's It's like watching the U.S. State Department wave like a little clock in front of them and say, you will support war. You will support endless militarism. You will support American exceptionalism. I mean, this is more valuable than all the Fox News articles in the world for the State Department, right? If you, like, sure, you can propagandize people with Fox News and MSNBC and CNN, have them lie to people and control the narrative and control people who are somewhat invested in politics, people who care, right? That's what the political news media does. But entertainment media controls everybody else, right? Because people are playing entertainment media. They're playing games like Call of Duty because it's fun, and they're not even thinking about politics. They're not even realizing that anything political is going on while they're being brainwashed. So it's a much more covert, much more subtle form of brainwashing that they do through entertainment media or through movies like The Avengers, where Iron Man is literally a military contractor, literally like a representative of the military industrial complex, and he's portrayed as the hero of the movie. It's extremely subtle, and people don't even realize it's political. And if you were to point this out to them, they'd be like, stop making my movies political. Like, no, your movies already are political. I'm trying to stop you from getting brainwashed, my friend. So yeah, this is why I play Final Fantasy. This is why I've never played shooting games. I don't know. I've never gotten into shooting games, and especially not Call of Duty. And I've always just wondered why that is. You know, was my brain just on a higher level than all my stupid wrestler friends playing their shooting games? They just seem so stupid to me. I mean, my friends play the same maps over and over again. It's just the same thing. Point and shoot, point and shoot, point and shoot. And the story sounds like it was written by an 18-year-old intern at the Pentagon. Just never understood why it was that entertaining. No offense. If you like Call of Duty, play Call of Duty. Of course. If you like the Avengers, watch the Avengers. Just understand that the State Department and the deep state have their fingerprints all over it. And, you know, entertainment media is a very, very powerful tool in controlling the narrative and maintaining ideological hegemony in this country. Tanky Call of Duty. The proletariat hunts down Wall Street bankers and DC politicians. I can hardly wait. Tanky Call of Duty would be sweet. You fight as Russia doing the special military. Dude, somebody make that a game. Somebody make that a game and then release it anonymously so you don't get literally like attacked and lambasted by the US media. But if someone made a game where you play as Russia and you launch the special military operation, because like that's what the Call of Duty games are, right? They're based on the US empire, which is one of the most offensive and murderous empires in the world. Russia's special military operation had way more justification than any of the wars that the US has done in the past 20 years or past 70 years since World War II. So if we're allowed to make video games, why can't they make video games? Why is there not a video game where you play as Putin in a mech suit running through Ukraine fighting the Azov battalion? Like Putin has like Nazi finding technology. He's like in his mech and it finds swastikas and he launches like wrist rockets at them. I'd play that game. Bad Empanada has a video playing a Palestine game. What's that like, I wonder? Thank you so much for the super chat, Dog Eater. Thank you so much. One of my favorite videos, and this is what I talked about in my TikTok that went viral about the State Department connections and control of Call of Duty. I was like, there's a CNN video where they show North Korean children playing a video game where they're, I think, shooting Americans in the game or something. And then CNN is like, look how terrible this is. These kids are being brainwashed by their government through the video games. It's like, what do you think Call of Duty is, bro? It's the same thing. It's the same thing, only worse. Except for North Korea, the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, was actually attacked by the U.S. and we killed 20% of their population, right? Most of the U.S.'s wars have been offensive. We've never been invaded, right? So that's the difference. They're celebrating a defensive war that helped their country maintain sovereignty. We're brainwashing people into supporting offensive wars that kill millions of people. But then CNN's like, look at how they're brainwashed through the video games. Yeah, we're not brainwashed through video games, though, because Call of Duty is not made by the government. How could it be brainwashing? How could a corporation brainwash you? Even though Call of Duty is kind of owned by the government because there's so much State Department control. Let's see here. I can't find the... Oh, here it is. This is crazy. There's a Palestinian resistance video game.
Oh, shit.
Is there like a story to this?
Mossad uniform first. Chief will just tell me all.
You gotta hunt down members of Mossad. That's pretty awesome. Shout out to whoever made that. Hero movies also sell the idea that billionaires are geniuses. They're always vanguardists and eccentric in the most sexually appealing way possible. Yeah, they make Tony Stark like Elon Musk, right? People think Elon Musk is a real life Tony Stark, but that's not possible, right? In the movie, Tony Stark like creates the Iron Man suit himself, right? This military contractor, this capitalist is just so smart. His mind's just on another level. So he's able to do all of this stuff himself. That's not how it works in real life, right? There are teams of engineers who work under Elon Musk, and they work together cooperatively to produce the commodities that SpaceX and Tesla sell and make money off of, right? It's not like Elon's got such a big brain. He can think for 50 engineers just by himself, and he's designing everything by himself. That's not how production works. But these superhero movies push the myth that that's how production works, that you can have someone like Tony Stark in real life who's got just such a big brain that their brain does the work of 50 engineers working cooperatively. And, people don't realize that they're being brainwashed with that because it's so subtle, but they are. Then you hear people talk about Elon Musk. It's like, wow, they really think he's Tony Stark. They really don't realize that Tesla's engineers are working 70 to 80 hours a week. And actually, they get paid very shitty, too. And then a lot of them call it Slave X. And what they do is work at Tesla for 2 years and then leave. Because once you have that on your resume, it helps you work anywhere else. But yeah, it's a very, very subtle form of brainwashing. And it gets you to see the world through black and white. There are good guys and there are bad guys. There are the good guys like American weapons contractor, military industrial complex member Tony Stark. And then there are bad guys who the good guys have to destroy. And then they pitch you America's wars the exact same way. Putin's the bad guy. America's the good guys. We got to go destroy. Saddam Hussein, he's the bad guy. He's the boogeyman. Muammar Gaddafi, Bashar al-Assad, they're the bad guys. We're the good guys. It's this comic book way of seeing the world that's pushed through these really, really simplistic movies. Thank you, Leo. Thank you again, Leo. Dang, raking in the super chats today. Thank you to Dog Eater and Leo for the 6 super chats. Appreciate y'all. Of course, our project would be impossible without that. In Goat Simulator, you can nuke the town and unlock Kim Jong-un's achievement, but no one besides the USA have actually used it to erase cities. True, maybe it was a reference to when the US carpet bombed Korea and killed 20% of their country before Kim Jong-un's grandpa, Kim Il-sung, kicked the U.S. occupiers out of the northern part of Korea and established the DPRK. Maybe that's what they're referencing. But no, you're right. They're probably referencing Kim Jong-un and North Korea having nuclear weapons because, heaven forbid a small country that the U.S. is trying to destroy and carpet bomb. Heaven forbid they develop weaponry to protect themselves. We're the only ones who can have nukes because we're the good guys, right? I've actually played Goat Simulator back in the day. EPRK has some nice films too, for sure. I'm sure their movies are better than freaking ours. These movies are also like the Avengers movies are so simplistic too. It's just the same comic book narrative every time. Another U.S. war crime was the firebombing of Tokyo and Dresden. Yeah. Yep. Good point. That is so funny that people associate nuclear weapons with Kim Jong-un, even though the DPRKs never launched a nuke at anyone. And even though we carpet bombed their country, and we're the only country who's ever dropped nukes on anyone. She-Hulk even made fun of the formula, but then just kept doing it. Yeah, they don't know anything else. That's why I got to go back and watch old Soviet movies. It's the only way. All right, I got one more video today. I don't know how much commentary I'll have on this video. I was going to watch Charlie Kirk lecturing somebody about economics, but I'll save it for another day. I can't do it today with that, man. My brain will explode. I already got super pissed off at Biden sending $700 to Maui and $750 billion to Ukraine, so I can't get that angry twice in one stream. I need Carlos and them to react to it with me. But this is Gabor Mate, psychologist, who Carlos just read and who I've been getting really into lately, listening to his podcasts and stuff. The father of Aaron Mate, the fantastic journalist from the Gray Zone, who's published a lot of really incredible work and exposed the U.S.'s dirty war in Syria, exposed the Russiagate conspiracy, tons and tons of fantastic journalism. So this is his dad, and here he talks about Jordan Peterson, and I don't know if I'll have much to say on it because I think he says it all. Right, this is one of the best analyses of Jordan Peterson that I've ever seen, and he says some dumb things about existing socialism and the Soviet Union or whatever, but we can overlook that for today.
And you're from Canada.
Yeah.
One of the biggest phenomenon of the last couple of years has been Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
What have you made of him, his rise, and what it says about the culture that people are so thirsting for what he's talking about?
Peterson, first, he was very bright, extraordinarily articulate, and in some ways a compelling speaker. So he's an attractive figure in some ways. When I read him, I sense a lot of suppressed rage in him. In fact, I think his voice is choking with rage a lot of the time. It's interesting because he talks.
Is that not such a good analysis of Peterson? And we've talked a lot about Peterson on this show and his own psychology, right? He's telling everybody else to clean their room and pull themselves up by their bootstraps when he's addicted to benzos. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a health issue. I hope he gets the help he needs and is able to kick benzos and live a happy life. But, he's lecturing everybody else on, you leftists are critiquing society, yet your rooms aren't clean. You're not pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps. Meanwhile, he's doing benzos, and in a lot of his videos, his room isn't even clean. So it's just really interesting. And we've also talked about the weird thing that he wrote about his grandma in his book and all this weird stuff. But when I heard him say this, that Peterson's voice is choking with rage, like that is what it is. Like, dude is filled with rage. And now he spends all day on Twitter. The dude just tweets and tweets and tweets and tweets in response to all his haters, the evil troll demons, as he calls them. There's so much rage inside that guy. I just wish he could let it go.
Talks about rage, that you have to deal with it. I don't think you understand just how angry he is. And if you look at his websites, the comments are full of rage by his young acolytes. Now that's an energetic thing. That it's his energy that draws people as much as what he actually teaches. Secondly, he teaches repression. I mean, he very rightly takes an issue where somebody mandates a certain kind of language, and he very rightly and righteously says that I will not be dictated to about what language I'm going to use. Well, good for him. I'm all in favor of not mandating language, on the one hand. On the other hand, he basically advocates repression. In his book, he talks about how an angry 2-year-old child needs to be sit by themselves until they get over it, rather than understanding why a child would be angry at age 2, what frustrations they're having, and what human contact they need to help them move through that anger. He says, repress the anger.
This is such an interesting psychological critique of Peterson. He says a 2-year-old angry child needs to sit by themselves and be alone, which is probably how Peterson was raised. That's probably how his parents raised him, and that's probably why he's so filled with rage. You know, and I would make a different analysis. I would say philosophically, this is Peterson being obsessed with individualism, right? Set the child by themselves to stew in their own anger until they can figure out how to get over it, right? But we know that humans are collective animals. Humans rely on each other, right? Our relationships are part of what makes up who we are. The people around us, our environments, make up who we are as people and how we feel. Right. So what that kid needs isn't to be left alone to sit in a room and stew with their rage. Right. They need compassion. They need intervention from the outside. They need other people. They need community. They need people to help them get over this rage and help them deal with these emotions. They need to be taught how to deal with their emotions. Right. But Peterson, as the individualist, that's not what he believes. He believes if you're in a bad spot, you know, it's your fault and you need to figure it out. And it's nobody else's job to help you, and you shouldn't need anyone else to help you, which, you know, with that ideology, it's no wonder he got addicted to benzos. He's probably filled with rage, right? He probably blames himself for everything. It's all my fault, you know. I don't need help from anybody. I got to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and probably drove him crazy thinking about the world that way. You need to lean on other people. You need to value your relationships with other people. It's not all on you, man. None of us can do it by ourselves.
So he's all about repressed anger, as far as I'm concerned. And it's very interesting how he talks about children. He talks about little varmints and little...
This is such a good way to put it. Thank you, Yellow Parenti. As Carlos would say, I think Peterson inverts values. He fetishizes struggle and self-discipline as a self-defense against his own inner turmoil. Exactly. He feels that inner turmoil. He feels that inner rage. He goes, I just need more discipline. Right? I just need to struggle more. I just need to do this myself. And it's like, you know, discipline is good, you know, and you should work to be a strong individual. But if you're dealing with emotional pain and emotional turmoil, the best thing you can do is talk about it with someone else, is lean on somebody else, is have, you know, good relationships with somebody else who you can talk to about it. And if you don't have that, or if you don't even believe in that, if you just believe that you should figure it all out yourself, that if you're angry, you should sit alone in your room for a while until you could figure it out, you're never going to get over it. And then you're going to turn to substance abuse.
Monsters and so on. I know that's meant to be humorous, but it's also a certain way of thinking of the young human child. So fundamentally, I see him as an agent of repression. He posing as an agent of libertarianism. Not to mention, he's got this bee in his bonnet about what he considers to be, seems to consider to be conspiracies by left-wing intellectuals. They seem to be his bête noire. Being a left-wing intellectual myself, I like to talk to him sometimes. What are you so upset about, Jordan? What are you so afraid of? You know, he talks about these bloody Marxists. And he points out very accurately all the horror.
I think he meant to say inaccurately. I mean, there was horror during the revolution, but there was people rising up against their dictatorial, monarchic, imperialistic state and ruling class.
That occurred under so-called Marxist regimes, particularly in the Soviet Union. He's absolutely accurate about that.
No, he's not. No, he's not. You're a psychologist. Stop commenting on history. Just kidding. He doesn't have to stop commenting on it, but he should learn it a little better. Talk to your son, Aaron.
But then he promotes Christianity. Shall I tell him about the mass murders that occurred in the name of Christianity? Should I tell him about all the millions that were slaughtered in the names of the gentle Jesus? In other words, let's be fair about it. He seems to pick ideologies to attack and abhor and embrace other ideologies that are just as murderous in practice sometimes. It's a much more interesting.
Jeez. It's almost like every state is a tool of repression or suppression with a monopoly on violence. And it's just the Marxists who recognize that, recognize what the state apparatus does. And it's not one ideology that has a higher death count than the others. But, I mean, that's not true necessarily because neoliberalism would have the highest death count of any. But I get the point he's making about Christianity here because Peterson hates on the bloody Marxists and the socialists, yet he holds up libertarianism and Christianity. And it's like, well, you want to do death count economics, Peterson? You want to start tallying up all the deaths caused by or influenced by Christianity and neoliberalism? Because it's going to be way more people than who have ever been killed by a Marxist or Marxists.
Question for me, what happened in Eastern Europe? How come under an ideology that was meant to liberate people, so many people were oppressed? I come from Eastern Europe. I was born in Hungary. He doesn't have to tell me about what it was like. But how about asking, how come a religious philosophy that was meant to promote love and acceptance and compassion has become such an agent of 2 millennia of repression, oppression, and killing? So can we be objective, or we're going to be simply tribal about it? I have a lot to say to Jordan, or a lot to, as much as I appreciate actually some of what he says, and it's interesting to find him. I think he's a very mixed figure, largely an agent of repression.
Same. I also appreciate some of what he says.
I just wanted to get
encouraging young men to clean their room and make something of themselves, and not completely fall into neoliberal ideology in some ways almost. Although Peterson is also a promoter of neoliberal ideology. But yeah, I appreciate some of the self-help stuff, right? But it's such a mixed bag, and he takes it to such extremes. And then ever since he stopped being an actual psychologist, ever since he left the academy, he needs to make money somehow. And the easiest way for him to make money is to work for big libertarian think tanks, to work for big NGOs and big organizations that are basically going to pay him tons of money just to be a right-wing grifter. And that's what he's been doing lately. Okay, quick question. Are you finally done simping for the Sound of Freedom? And are you now simping for Jason Aldean? Man, Reclaimed, what the hell are you ever talking about, bro? You are so wrapped up in online drama. Sound of Freedom? I never said anything about Sound of Freedom on the internet except a tweet saying, should I watch this movie? Or is it a QAnon movie? Jason Aldean, I posted a meme on my personal Facebook account roasting Jason Aldean because a bunch of my friends from back home liked him and his song. And I said, they kept saying, I stand with Jason Aldean. So I posted a picture of Vanilla Ice. Or they were saying, I stand with Jason Aldean. Try that in a small town. So I posted a picture of Vanilla Ice and said, I stand with Vanilla Ice. Ice Ice Baby. So I've never said anything positive about Jason Aldean. And I just want to know if you have a clear break. I've never even brought up these two subjects, but go ahead and try and cancel us for them. Yes, you did multiple times on the streams. Okay, well, if I ever brought up Jason Aldean, it was to shit on him. And I've been pretty clear about that. But yeah, try and cancel us for something new. That seems like a productive use of your time, Reclaimed. Jesus Christ. Are you a rootin' tootin' Marxist? Yes. All right, stop. Collaborate and listen. Ice is back with a brand new invention. Something got a hold of me tightly. Flow like a harpoon daily and nightly. Will it ever stop? Yo, I don't know. Turn off the lights and I'll glow. To the extreme, I rock a mic like a vandal. Light up the stage and wax a chump like a candle. Dance. Go watch a speaker that booms. I'm killing your brain like a poisonous mushroom. Deadly. When I play a dope melody, anything less than the best is a felony. Love it or leave it. You better gain weight. You better hit bullseyes. The kid don't play. If there was a problem, yo, I'll solve it. Check out the hook while my DJ revolves it. Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby. Man, what a good show we've had today, folks. I really enjoyed this. Thank you all for joining me today for the Eddie Liger Power Hour. Make sure you go tweet at Joe Biden and tell him to send more than $700 to Hawaii. Appreciate you all. Make sure you go follow Danny Haifong. His show is fantastic. Tell him he did a great job when he was speaking to the United Nations. Follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you so much to our moderators, Jacob on Twitch, Were Pilgrim, and Cobra Commander on YouTube. I appreciate the crap out of you guys. I'm going to appreciate you even more when we interview Oliver Anthony, and there's like 1 million people in here, and you're going to have to try and corral them all. I don't know how that's going to go. Maybe we should have a meeting and talk about that at some point. But either way, this was a great show. Appreciate you all. We'll see you next time.
Without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.